Background of the prison facility and the inmate who planned the escape. Circumstances that led to the desire for escape. The sun had barely risen, and already the rusted iron gates of Central Jail were groaning with the weight of another day. Birds fluttered above the concrete walls, unaware, or perhaps indifferent, to the silence that smothered the lives inside. This wasn't just any prison. Central Jail had a reputation. It was a fortress, built not just of cement and steel, but of fear, routine, and hopelessness. Escape was not just unlikely, it was unthinkable. And yet, inside cell block C, a man named Khalid Qureshi sat silently, his back against the wall, his eyes fixed on a single crack in the ceiling. To the guards, he was just another inmate, convicted, sentenced, forgotten. But Khalid wasn't like the others, not anymore. 4 years ago, Khalid was a mechanic in Karachi, known in his neighborhood as the Engine Whisperer. He lived a modest life with his mother and younger brother. That life ended one rainy evening when police raided his shop and accused him of being involved in a robbery he swore he didn't commit. The evidence was circumstantial, the trial quick, and the sentence heavy. 15 years behind bars. At first, Khalid held on to hope. He filed appeals, wrote letters to human rights groups, and prayed. But months turned into years. His appeals were rejected. His brother stopped visiting. His mother passed away. That was the moment something in Khalid broke, quietly, deeply, permanently. He wasn't angry, not anymore. He was focused, calculating. His mind, once filled with pistons and gears, now ran on a single mission: freedom. Central Jail was a city of its own, a maze of cells, corridors, checkpoints, and watchtowers. It was patrolled by guards who had seen every kind of deception. But what they didn't see was Khalid's mind working behind the calm expression he wore each day. They didn't notice that he was quietly mapping the prison, observing the guards' shifts, studying weaknesses no one else thought existed. It started with small things: a loose tile in the shower room, a faulty latch in the kitchen window, a guard who always took a smoke break near the boiler room. Khalid noticed what others ignored. He began collecting bits of information, memorizing routines, and slowly earning the trust of the staff. To those around him, Khalid appeared reformed, quiet, polite, cooperative. He took up sewing uniforms in the prison workshop and taught illiterate inmates how to write their names. The warden even mentioned him during a press visit as an example of successful rehabilitation. But no one knew that behind that calm exterior was a man who had nothing to lose and everything to gain. What made Khalid different wasn't just his intelligence, it was his patience. While others fantasized about escaping in the chaos of a riot or through brute force, Khalid believed in something more dangerous: precision. He knew one mistake would cost him everything, but what pushed him over the edge? What made him finally act? It was a letter, delivered late, water-stained and torn at the edges. It was from his younger brother, just 4 lines scribbled in urgency. "They're coming for me next. Same men who framed you. I don't know how long I can hide. I need you, Bai. I need you free." That night, Khalid didn't sleep. He didn't eat the next morning. Instead, he picked up a small screwdriver he had hidden in the hem of his uniform, a tool the guards didn't know was missing. This wasn't about revenge. It wasn't even about justice anymore. For Khalid, escape wasn't a choice. It was survival, for him, and for the only family he had left. The prison walls still stood, cold and silent, but something inside them had shifted. A storm was brewing, not in the sky, but in the mind of a man the system had forgotten. And as the first whisper of wind passed through the broken tile in the shower room, it carried with it a silent promise. Step-by-step details of how the escape was planned. The tools, people, and tactics involved. Freedom isn't just walked into, it's built, piece by piece, in silence, in shadows. Khalid knew this better than anyone. The night he read his brother's letter, something clicked in his mind. The years of observing, waiting, blending in, It was all leading to this. The blueprint had been forming slowly in his head, and now it was time to bring it to life. Step 1. Information. Khalid didn't trust anyone, not even the few inmates who had shared bread and stories with him. But he listened. He listened closely, to whispers in the mess hall, complaints in the yard, drunken conversations between guards. Over time, he had compiled a mental schedule. When the lights flickered during the night shift, when the backup generator kicked in, which guards were always late, which cameras had blind spots, and most importantly, which staff members could be bribed. Money was hard to come by, but not impossible. Khalid had fixed the sewing machines in the uniform workshop and was rewarded with extra rations and occasional access to outside laundry jobs. He used these favors wisely, building quiet alliances, trading smokes and sugar for trust, and eventually, for silence. Step 2. Mapping the route. Unlike most prisoners, Khalid never fantasized about digging tunnels or breaking through walls. He knew Central Jail too well. Its structure was thick, reinforced, and old. But old meant worn. Cracks, rust, weak spots. His route would begin in the boiler room, just behind the prison laundry, an area where supervision was minimal, especially during heat waves when guards avoided the place. Months ago, he had noticed a maintenance shaft partially covered by a rusted steel grate. It led into an old drainage tunnel, one the jail's newer staff seemed to have forgotten even existed, but the grate was bolted tight, and he didn't have a wrench. That's where planning became survival art. Step 3. Acquiring tools. Tools in a prison aren't found, they're built. Khalid began with a sharpened spoon, which he kept hidden inside the hollowed-out leg of a broken chair. He managed to snag a small screwdriver from the tailoring workshop, slipped unnoticed into the lining of his kurta. Over time, he pieced together a makeshift toolkit hidden in different parts of the prison, under a loose stone in the yard, inside a broken electrical outlet, behind the sink in the bathroom. He wasn't working alone, exactly, but the people who helped him didn't know they were helping. He borrowed things, replaced them, and worked at odd hours. A misplaced washer here, a shortened screw there, small acts of sabotage that looked accidental but bought him time. Step 4. Distraction strategy. Even a perfect plan needs a cover. Khalid waited for the week of the religious festival, when staff was reduced and inmates were granted extended prayer time. It was the only time when certain hallways were left unattended for up to 15 minutes. That would be his window. He carefully set the stage for a controlled fight, one that wouldn't cause injuries but would definitely draw guards' attention. 2 inmates in the mess hall owed him favors, and he cashed them in. On the chosen night, a loud argument would erupt in the main courtyard over food distribution. It would be heated, dramatic, but safe. All eyes would turn to the courtyard and away from the boiler room. Step 5. Timing and nerves. Everything came down to exact seconds. He practiced his route in the dark, pacing the distance from the laundry room to the shaft, counting every step. He timed how long it took him to unfasten a bolt with his makeshift wrench. He trained himself to crawl through narrow spaces, holding his breath, ignoring rats and stench. He was scared. Of course he was. One wrong move, one creaking door, one early return of a guard, and he'd be in solitary, or worse. But fear had no place now. Not when every piece was finally in position. Finally, he wrote a note, short, coded, and wrapped in plastic, addressed to his brother. He bribed a kitchen assistant to smuggle it out, hidden inside a bag of discarded vegetable peels. It was risky, but necessary. The note read only, "In 7 days, after prayer. Wait near the old pumping station. I'll be there." 7 days. That was all that stood between him and freedom, or death. The walls of Central Jail hadn't moved. The guards still walked their lazy circles. The world still believed Khalid was just another inmate with no hope left. But in the shadows, beneath the weight of stone and silence, a plan was alive, breathing, ready. And Khalid? He wasn't hoping anymore. He was counting down. a real-time account of the escape attempt, tensions, obstacles, and unexpected events during the process. The day began like any other in Central Jail, humid, loud, and predictable. No one knew it would be remembered as the day the impossible happened. Khalid woke up before the morning call for Fajr prayer. He sat quietly on his cot, running through the plan one last time. Every breath, every step, every sound was already playing in his head, like a film he had watched 100 times. Today wasn't for thinking. Today was for doing. The prison was quieter than usual. It was the third day of Eid-ul-Adha, and most of the staff were either on holiday or sluggish from late-night gatherings. Fewer eyes, more opportunities. At noon, the courtyard buzzed with activity as inmates lined up for a special Eid lunch, overcooked meat curry with dry naan. Just as planned, the argument broke out between the two inmates Khalid had quietly recruited weeks ago. One accused the other of stealing his extra meat. Shouting turned into shoving. Trays clattered to the ground. Guards rushed in. Khalid didn't even glance back. The moment had arrived. While everyone's attention was on the courtyard chaos, he slipped out of the kitchen corridor with a basket of dirty uniforms in hand, his cover. He moved quickly but without panic, heading toward the laundry room near the back of the prison. He knew the cameras in this stretch had been inactive for weeks due to an electrical issue he had secretly caused himself. Inside the laundry room, the heat from the boiler was suffocating. Sweat poured down his face as he set the basket down and locked the door from the inside. This was it. Khalid knelt beside the rusted grate in the corner of the room, the maintenance shaft. His fingers moved fast, pulling out the homemade screwdriver hidden in his sock. One by one, he loosened the bolts, careful not to drop them. Each creak of metal sounded like thunder in the silence. The fourth bolt refused to move. His hands trembled. The minutes ticked by. Panic clawed at the edges of his calm. He breathed slowly, wiped his hands on his shirt, and tried again. This time it gave way with a soft groan. He pulled the grate aside and peered into the black hole below. It smelled of rot and rust. Rats skittered into the shadows. He didn't hesitate. He lowered himself into the shaft, pushing the grate back into place from inside. It clicked softly. Darkness swallowed him. The tunnel was narrower than he remembered, and the air was stale. He crawled slowly, counting every movement. His heart pounded so loudly he feared it might echo off the walls. 15 meters in, he reached a fork. Left led to a blocked pipe. Right led to a forgotten drain hatch outside the outer wall. He turned right. He reached the hatch just as his legs began to cramp. He pushed against the rusty lid with all his strength. Nothing. He kicked. Still nothing. A wave of fear hit him. Was it sealed shut? He pulled a small wrench from his waistband and started tapping the hinges, gently at first, then harder. The third tap loosened a flake of rust, then another. He braced his back against the tunnel wall and pushed with both legs. A loud crack echoed through the tunnel, and the hatch opened. Fresh air hit his face like a slap. He gasped, blinking into the dimming light of the evening. He was outside, not free, but outside the wall. The hatch had led him behind an old pumping station, half a kilometer from the main prison gate. Overgrown weeds and broken fencing hid the area from sight. He crawled out, wiping grime and blood from his arms. And there he was, his brother. A thin boy, barely 19, standing nervously near the edge of the road with a motorcycle. His eyes widened in disbelief. "Bhai, you did it?" Khalid didn't answer. He grabbed his brother, held him for a split second, then nodded. "Let's go. Now." They took off on the bike, speeding through alleys and side roads Khalid had mapped out in his mind. They didn't talk. There was no need. Behind them, Central Jail was still searching the courtyard, breaking up the staged fight, unaware that their most model inmate had just vanished beneath their feet. The alarm would sound an hour later, but by then, Khalid was gone, his prison uniform dumped in a drainage ditch, his identity buried in the dust behind him. For now, he wasn't thinking about tomorrow, or even about what came next. All he knew was this: He had done the unthinkable. He was free. How the escaped prisoner managed to survive outside. Encounters with law enforcement and hiding strategies. Freedom was supposed to feel like wind in the face, laughter in the lungs, and the weight of chains finally gone. But for Khalid, it felt different. It felt like paranoia. Every car horn sounded like a siren. Every glance from a stranger was an accusation. Every second outside was a balancing act between relief and terror. After the escape, Khalid and his brother didn't go home. Not that they had one anymore. Their old neighborhood in Karachi was too exposed, too familiar. The authorities would look there first. So they rode until dawn, taking side streets, country roads, and finally arriving in a small rural village near Thatta, where their late mother once had distant relatives. They didn't announce who they were. Khalid took on a fake name, Yasir Mahmoud, a laborer from Quetta looking for honest work. His brother became Imran, a cousin traveling with him for odd jobs. The village was quiet, almost frozen in time. Mud houses, grazing goats, and open fields made it the perfect hiding place. There were no police patrols, no CCTV cameras, and most importantly, no one cared where you came from if you kept your head down. Khalid found work repairing farm machinery. His hands, once skilled with engines, found a rhythm again. He fixed tractors, water pumps, even bicycles. Word spread of Yasir the mechanic, and soon he was earning enough to rent a small room on the outskirts of the village. But hiding wasn't easy. News of the jailbreak had exploded across the country. Every newspaper carried his picture. CCTV footage unavailable, the headlines screamed. Prisoner escapes without a trace. A few overzealous channels offered rewards for information. For weeks, police checkpoints were set up on major roads, and every mechanic shop in Karachi was quietly questioned. Khalid avoided radios and newspapers, but his brother, Imran, kept track. He'd cut out any article with Khalid's name, storing them in a tin box under their mattress. "They think you fled to Punjab," he whispered one night. "They've got no clue you're here." Still, Khalid knew it was only a matter of time. He couldn't hide forever. Then, one afternoon, a stranger showed up at the repair shop. Mid-40s, dressed like a local farmer, but his shoes were too clean, his handshake too firm, his eyes stayed on Khalid for too long. "Pump's jammed," the man said, pointing to a small tractor engine. "Heard you're the man to fix it." Khalid nodded, forced a smile, and got to work. But he knew. The man asked too many questions. "Where are you from? How long have you been here? You look familiar, brother." When the man left, Khalid told Imran, "We move tonight." That night, they boarded a train from a station 2 towns over, using fake ID cards Khalid had paid a local printer for weeks earlier. Destination: Multan. In Multan, they started again. New names, new lives. This time, Khalid took up work in a junkyard, disassembling old cars for scrap. The work was dirtier, harder, but it kept him invisible. He learned quickly how to blend in, never speak too much, don't show anger, never talk politics or prison. He became a ghost in plain sight. But the ghost had a heart. Imran, still a teenager, hated hiding. "We didn't do anything wrong," he'd say. "Why should we live like fugitives?" Khalid always gave the same answer. "Because truth doesn't set you free, it only gets you caught." Then one day, something unexpected happened. A man came to the junkyard looking for spare parts for his Suzuki van. He was from Karachi. They struck up casual conversation. The man looked familiar, and Khalid felt the blood drain from his face. It was one of the police officers who had testified at his trial, the same one who helped frame him. The man didn't recognize him. He bought the part, thanked Khalid, and left. Khalid stood there shaken to his core. The system that broke him was still out there, unaware that the man it tried to erase had walked right past it, breathing, working, surviving. That night, Khalid made a choice. He wouldn't run forever. He would build a life, not of revenge, but of quiet rebellion. Every engine he fixed, every coin he earned, every day he remained free, was victory. Life on the run wasn't easy. It was exhausting, lonely, fragile. But it was his life now, not the government's, not the prison's, not the corrupt officers, his. And that in itself was worth everything. The ultimate fate, whether the inmate was caught or remained free. Reflections and aftermath. 2 years had passed. Khalid no longer flinched when someone knocked at the door. His hands no longer trembled when the news played in the background. His face had changed, beard fuller, skin darker from long hours under the sun, shoulders broader from manual labor. But it wasn't just his appearance that changed, it was his soul. He wasn't hiding anymore. He was surviving, quietly, steadily, free. Multan had become home, not by choice, but by resilience. He and Imran rented a small, worn-out flat near a busy auto market. By day, Khalid fixed engines in a rented corner of a scrapyard. By night, he read books that Imran brought from secondhand stalls. Books on law, on history, on justice. He knew one day he'd have to confront what was taken from him, not just his freedom, but his dignity. And if he ever got the chance, he wanted to be ready. But fate, it seemed, wasn't done with him. One evening, as monsoon clouds gathered over the city, Khalid returned to his shop to find a white car parked out front, not a customer. The engine was too clean, the tires too new. A government vehicle, he knew the type. 2 men were standing near the car, plainclothes, but unmistakably police. His heart sank. He turned around casually, walking the other way, but it was too late. "Yasir, right? Mechanic Sahab?" one of them called out. Khalid didn't run. He couldn't. The alley was narrow, and if he ran, Imran would be next. He turned, hands steady, face calm. "Yes? What's the problem?" The taller one smiled slightly, stepping closer. "Just need to ask a few questions. You look like someone we're trying to find." Khalid didn't blink. "People say that all the time." A long pause. Then the shorter man stepped forward. "We know who you are." Silence. Khalid nodded slowly. "Then I suppose there's no point pretending." What came next wasn't what he expected. "No cuffs," the taller man said. "Not here. Walk with us. Quietly." As they drove, Khalid asked, "Who gave me up?" The man in the front seat answered without looking back. "No one. We've been tracking you for 8 months. You were smart, kept moving, used fake names, never drew attention. But someone eventually always makes a mistake. Imran." Khalid's stomach twisted. His brother had recently tried to send a letter to a lawyer in Karachi about reopening the case, about new evidence. Maybe someone intercepted it. At the police station, they didn't beat him. They didn't even yell. He was offered tea, asked routine questions, fingerprinted. Then, silence. For 2 days. Finally, an officer with graying hair sat across from him and said, "You were sentenced, but you were also wrongfully convicted." Khalid stared at him. "Then why was I in prison?" The officer sighed. "That's the question, isn't it?" It turned out that during Khalid's time on the run, 2 key witnesses from his original trial had come forward, claiming they were pressured by the police to lie. A sting operation had caught one of the original investigating officers accepting bribes. An internal inquiry had begun, quietly but officially. And Khalid's case? It had become a stain. "Running from prison doesn't make you innocent," the officer said, "but everything you said checks out now." Khalid was given a choice: return to prison voluntarily, allow the system to reevaluate his case with the new evidence, or remain in custody under escape charges and be tried again, with a possible harsher sentence. Neither felt fair. He chose the first. For 6 more months, he returned to the very walls he had once broken out of, but this time he wasn't a number. Journalists picked up the story, lawyers volunteered to assist, NGOs advocating for wrongful convictions championed his case, and finally, after 7 years of being labeled a criminal, his conviction was overturned. On the day of his release, Khalid didn't smile. He didn't raise his fist in victory. He simply walked out of the jail's front gate, not through a tunnel, not in the dark, but through the very doors that had once slammed shut behind him. Imran was waiting. So was the same old motorcycle. This time, when they rode away, there were no sirens, no shadows, only wind and silence. Reflection. Khalid's story is not just about escape, it's about endurance. A man pushed to the edge by injustice, forced to flee, forced to fight not just for freedom, but for the truth. His story reminds us that sometimes justice isn't served by the system. Sometimes it's carved out, inch, by people who refuse to be buried. And though he had escaped once in the dark, his true freedom came in the light, when the truth finally had the courage to surface.